Hello, I'm Barry Daniel, and this is the podcast of the Middle Way Society. Our aim is to encourage a universal approach to living a more integrated, ethical life, avoiding dogma or any appeal to authority. My guest today is John Bolwell. He's an honorary Vice President of the Tai Chi Union of Great Britain. He's been practicing martial arts for over 30 years, and he's been a teacher of Tai Chi and Qigong for most of that time. Hello, John. Welcome to the MWS podcast.
Hi, Barry.
John, could you maybe start by telling us what Tai Chi is?
Okay, Tai Chi is a system that originates in China. If you were translating Tai Chi, often it's translated as Great Supreme or Grand Ultimate, and this very much relates to the Tai Chi symbol, the yin yang symbol. It's a physical art that's supposed to reflect and represent the way of nature and the way of the universe. Its origins, its legendary origins, go back to the 1200s in China. Where the story tells us that someone called Chan San Feng went to live in the mountains as a hermit, and there became very in tune and at one with nature. He studied the flows of nature, of water, of trees in the breeze and bamboo moving. And one of the stories tells us that he invented it in a dream. Another story tells us that one day he was watching a fight between a crane and a snake, and he observed how the crane used its sharp beak, its claws, its large wings to attack the snake, and the snake used its coiling, writhing, twisting, evasive movements to avoid the attacks.
Right. And
the story says that eventually the crane flew off and the snake slid away to its whole underground hole. And being impressed by this, he then encompassed both the qualities of the snake and the crane in the movements of the Tai Chi.
Okay.
And you see this reflected in the names of some of the moves, like snake creeps down into the water, or white crane spreads its wings, often quite poetic names, but we see a little reflection of that story of the origin of Tai Chi. Having said that, the story can also be taken on an allegorical level as well. Very commonly throughout myths of the world, the bird relates to the spiritual and the snake relates to the earthly, either the world or sometimes even the underworld, and very often these are seen depicted fighting one another. It's that idea of the conflict of the spiritual and the material. In the West, very often it's the eagle and the snake fighting. In the East, the crane and the snake. So it can the legend, the story can be viewed on many different levels.
Yep.
That's its legendary origins. Historically, the historians have sort of traced it back to about 1600. So that story of Chan San Feng was supposed to be in the 1200s in the Wudang Mountains of China, but actually tracing back, they seem to go to about 1600 to a village called the Chen family village in China, and most of the modern day Tai Chi styles could be traced back to there.
Right. Okay. And it's considered a martial art, isn't it, Tai Chi? But how does it differ from, say, an art like Kung Fu or like karate or judo? In what way is it different?
Okay, so there would be many similarities between Tai Chi, which is considered an internal martial art, and systems like Kung Fu or other systems that are often considered external. There'd be many similarities, but in the Tai Chi it's considered as much a mental practice as a physical practice.
Right.
And perhaps this goes back to that story of the bird, the crane and the snake. It's the idea that the bird might symbolise the higher mind and the snake the body.
Right.
So it's a training of the mind with the body,
Okay.
if you like.
Yeah.
So it's considered as much mental as physical art. And the way you see these in practice is that the internal arts would tend to look a lot softer, more rounded,
Right.
and less aggressive perhaps than the external arts.
Yeah. It's often been called moving meditation. Would you say that is an appropriate term for Tai Chi?
Yes, it very much could be. People come to Tai Chi very often for different reasons, the health aspect and the martial. Probably nowadays, I'd say most people come to it for its health benefits,
Right.
which have been quite well researched and documented.
What are those, apart from the meditative side?
There's been lots of research that has shown it improves balance, reduces falls, can lower blood pressure. Lots of research are done there.
Yeah.
Obviously, people on an everyday level find it very useful because they keep coming back, and
Right, yeah.
so I'd say most people come to it now through a health, wanting to improve their health.
Okay.
But still quite a significant number of people practice it as a martial art.
All right.
Often people come to it who have had a background in other martial arts, and perhaps they're getting to an age where the body doesn't recover as quickly from the knocks and so on they might get in the other arts, but they're still attracted to something that's very connected to what they've done before, and this is a softer path that you can carry on into later life as well.
How did it become popular in the West?
Well, I think perhaps in America it first became popular, partly I think due to the writings of someone called Robert W. Smith, who lived in the East and studied various arts over there and wrote books. His most well known and perhaps his Comprehensive Asian Fighting Arts, which is a survey of arts of China, Indonesia, Burma, India. And he was particularly inspired by and followed the path of Tai Chi.
Okay.
And I think he, as much as anyone, introduced it to an American audience.
Yeah.
And I think Tai Chi started to become practiced in America probably in the 60s.
Yeah.
I think there was one person certainly in England, teaching in the 60s, called Gerda Geddes, who'd learnt in China. And it gradually started to become more well known perhaps in the 70s.
Right, okay.
Yes.
And what's your background? How did you first become interested in it? And why have you maintained that interest?
I started, it was about 1973.
Yeah.
I was in my teens at the time. I was perhaps more interested in conventional sports, football, and I was very interested in all sorts of active sports.
Yeah.
I had a friend who practiced something he called Chinese boxing, which sounded a bit mysterious, and he always said, "Oh, come along and give it a go." But I was never sort of overly attractive. But I remember one season when the football finished for the summer, I thought, I'll give it a go over summer while the football's not on. And basically I got hooked into it.
Yeah.
And what was then known as Chinese boxing. Later, it was soon after that the pilot shows for the Kung Fu series on TV were shown in this country.
All right, yeah.
And suddenly the class then went from 6 people practicing up to 60 people practicing. So the Chinese boxing is a name that includes all the Chinese arts that might have a martial origin. Later this became more known as Kung Fu. Kung Fu means to be skillful in life, literally.
Yeah.
So originally it was someone who had skills in all sorts of life skills such as poetry, music, horse riding, martial arts. And it gradually became more used for people who practice martial arts.
And do you find that the practice of Tai Chi fosters that sort of integration? For example, by developing balance and fluidity and stability, can they become integrated into other aspects of one's life?
I think very much the physical and the mental reflect one another.
Right.
So the practices can bring about a physical balance. This can also help translate into everyday life. The movements of Tai Chi, usually done solo at first, but can be put with partners into exercises, and very valuable lessons I think can be learnt from this physical interaction with a partner.
Yeah.
Very much translating to how we relate to people in everyday life. So the movements of Tai Chi tend to teach us to meet and blend with someone in a harmonious way. They're seen as a way of resolving conflict rather than creating conflict. Okay. So if these can be practiced on a physical level, hopefully then these transfer into all aspects of life.
Right. Yielding seems to be a big part of Tai Chi. That seems to tie in with that idea, doesn't it?
Yes. There's the idea of blending with someone else's movements. So if a movement comes into us, if we're practicing with a partner, we may practice one partner making a push, and usually perhaps a normal reaction if someone pushes us either physically or verbally or on whatever level is to resist against it, fight against it, get angry or whatever. The practice of Tai Chi, we can learn to sort of accept that push and perhaps let it go by yielding with it.
The Taoist base of Tai Chi is also closely related to notions of balance like yin yang, etc. So how would you say this is related to the middle way? Do you see a connection there?
Yes, I think the yin yang, if you like, the two extremes, the sort of the male, the female, the light, the dark, but in the yin yang symbol they revolve around each other, which symbolises a dynamic interplay of the two. So this so never is anything completely yin or completely yang. So in the double fish that you often see in the yin yang symbol, in the black part there's a little white dot, which means in the yin, even within the yin at its most extreme, it convert to its opposite, the yang, and within the yang, the white, there's a black dot. So one thing is always interplaying with another. And again, this might be on a personal level. If someone is very yang, can they discover and find more softer parts of the personality in the body? And if someone is very yin or perhaps a low energy, can they be invigorated with more sort of yang energy? Or if someone's very feminine, can they find other aspects of the personality? So the practice is something that may help to encourage and become a more rounded person, which I think is the middle way, really, rather than being one extreme, the yin or the yang.
That makes sense. But one thing I haven't asked you about yet is Qigong. In many Tai Chi classes, you often find Qigong and Tai Chi going together, especially Qigong seems to be at the beginning of a class. Are they inextricably linked, the two? What is Qigong and how does it relate to Tai Chi?
Okay, so we were saying Tai Chi, the meaning of the words is often translated as great, supreme. Given its fuller title, it is usually Tai Chi Chuan. Chuan can be translated as fist or boxing. So Tai Chi Chuan means a physical manifestation of the yin yang, the great way.
Yeah.
Whereas it has its roots in martial arts as well as healing arts. Whereas Qigong means Qi is energy, Gong is skill. So literally it can be translated as energy skills or energy cultivation skills. So in Qigong there are actually literally many hundreds of systems that could vary from maybe static meditation, sitting meditation, standing meditation, to breathing exercises, to a whole range of exercises. So Qigong really is a very big umbrella that Tai Chi would be one particular system of.
Okay.
Having said that, probably more people practice Qigong for the health aspects, but also many martial arts have their own Qigongs within them. For example, in Shaolin Kung Fu, they practice their Qigongs to train the body how to take blows, how to take spear points to the throat, or whatever.
Okay.
So the Qigong systems are quite varied.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned that Qi is another word for energy.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit more about that and how congruent that idea, the Chinese idea of energy, is with a Western view of scientific view of how the body works?
Okay, yes. Qi is the Chinese name for it, which you'd see spelt two different ways. Sometimes CHI, and sometimes QI.
Okay.
Depending whether it's translated in the old Waite-Giles method of translation to English or the modern pinyin. You hear it referred to in Japan as Ki, Ki. It's related in India, prana. In the West, there are some similar concepts. I think in Spain you hear something called duende that they often talk of in flamenco. There's a certain spirit that a person has. I'm familiar with that. And perhaps this is like something that's almost indefinable, it's thought of, but something that's there, something that shows through. And I think you could probably correlate some of these Western ideas with the Eastern idea of Qi. In France, I think they have a term Elan, is it? Yes, there's a certain spirit or something that someone has.
Okay.
So I think we have some similar ideas and concepts in the West. Yes. Okay.
And finally, if people wanted to pursue an interest in Tai Chi or Qigong, how do they go about it?
Okay, so in the UK, probably the main organisation is the Tai Chi Union for Great Britain, which encompasses people who practice many different types of Tai Chi, because there are different styles and different approaches. So their website would be a good link for people to find people in different areas of the country. Having said that, there are other organisations who aren't members of that and may be prominent in different areas, so probably more local information and internet or local information would be good to find in any particular area.
Okay.
And I think if someone was looking at practicing Qigong or Tai Chi, then it's good to maybe have a look round at a couple of classes, because, as we said, the approach can be very variable, whether it's all health or a predominance of martial. A person would want to find a class that suits their needs and their requirements.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, John. Well, thank you ever so much for telling us a bit about Tai Chi. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome.
You can find out more about Middle Way philosophy at www.middlewaysociety.org.